Hello and welcome to Anime Worth Watching. On this episode I'm going to be talking about the fantasy anime Orphen. Now the full title of this show is something like Sorcerous Stabber Orphen, but I'm just going to be calling it Orphen for brevity's sake. I first saw this show when it was airing on Adult Swim alongside Cowboy Bebop and Initial D. Back then I was really starved for anime, so when I first saw this show I was absolutely captivated by it. It's the first fantasy anime that I remember really getting into, and it holds a lot of nostalgic value for me. However, over time it appears to have been forgotten about, and I don't really hear that many people talking about it anymore. So hopefully by doing this video I can convince at least a few people to check it out. The story follows the titular character Orphen, who is a former student of the Tower of Fame, which is an extremely prestigious sorcerer school. He's on a quest to find this dragon called the Bloody August, which he for some reason names Osley. He is joined by Magic, his apprentice, and Cleo, who owns a magical sword which is necessary for Orphen's quest to find the Bloody August. One of the things I like about this story is it perfectly sets up the epic adventure that these characters end up going on. They end up going to a lot of beautiful and deadly places, and they end up meeting a lot of interesting characters along the way. I loved the adventure aspect of this show. I was always excited to see where the characters would go next and what discoveries they'd make when they'd get there. Another thing I loved in this show was the comedy. At first this show seemed really dark and serious, however there was a surprising amount of humour here. While the show does have its fair share of great dramatic moments, the comedy in here helps keep the show lighthearted and fun. I also found the mystery aspect of this show very intriguing. At the start of the show there are a ton of questions like, why does Orphen call the Bloody August Osley? Why does he want to find it so bad? Didn't he just try and kill him? Isn't the Bloody August dangerous? Why is Cleo's magical sword necessary? Later on in the show, when you find the answers to these questions, it's actually very heartbreaking. It helps you empathise with Orphen and gives you a much better understanding of his personality and motivations. Orphen at first comes off as your standard brooding protagonist with a ton of awesome powers, and to a certain extent that's kind of who he is. However, he does break away from this cliche a bit by being extremely kind-hearted and going out of his way to help people. There's even one point in the series where he spends 24 hours climbing a mountain to grab some herbs in order to save the life of a person he hates. I can really respect a character that can go out of their way to save somebody they despise. Next up is Cleo, who also starts off fairly cliché. She's your standard tsundere who's always whining, always complaining, and always getting angry over stupid crap. However, as the story progresses, she becomes motivated to become a better person. She learns about how she can best support the team, and she also tries to comfort Orphen in his darkest moments. She's probably the character that changes the most in the show, and I really loved seeing her transform. Next up is Vulcan and Dalton, who owe Orphen a ton of money because they lost it while gambling against him. Because of this, they do whatever they can to screw Orphen and his companions over whenever they get the opportunity. These guys are my favourite characters in the show, as I found them to be absolutely hilarious. They were the reason why I found this show so funny, and I loved it every time they came on screen. Finally we have Magic, who I left to last because he's my least favourite character. This isn't due to his personality, he's actually quite likeable. My problem with Magic is with his lack of development. At the start of the show, Magic's sorcery skills are very limited, which is absolutely fine because he's only an apprentice after all. The problem is he doesn't really get any more powerful. At the end of the series, his skills are just as limited. He doesn't really progress at all in his sorcery, which was really disappointing for me. Overall though, I loved this show's cast of characters. I really became attached to them and wanted them to be successful on their quest. Since the show was originally made in 1998, the visuals are a little bit outdated. When compared to modern shows, the colours are a lot blander and the animation looks a little bit stilted. However, for its time the show looked great, and I think people can still watch it today without getting too distracted by the outdated visuals. One place that Orphen definitely holds up though is its soundtrack. There's a ton of variety in the music used. You've got the somber tracks for the more emotional moments, and you've got the really fast-paced tracks which add a ton of tension to the action. The final thing I feel I need to mention in the sound department is the dub, which gets a ton of hate. The reason for this is when they translated the show into English, they made a ton of changes to the dialogue which many fans found unnecessary. They also added a few lines which many fans felt didn't really fit the fantasy setting.
Go dragon! Go dragon! It's your birthday!
Now I personally loved the dub. I think the voice actors did a fantastic job. However, purists will probably want to stick with the sub due to the somewhat shoddy translation. In terms of recommendations, I would definitely recommend this show to fantasy fans. If you enjoy anime like Slayers, this show will be right up your alley. I would also recommend this to people who are fans of adventure series. As I mentioned before, the characters travel to a ton of interesting places, so I think adventure fans will love this show. Lastly, I would recommend this show to people who are fans of anime from the 90s. If you love shows like Cowboy Bebop and Trigun, this show is from the same era, so you might want to consider giving it a shot. Now, in terms of the people who should probably avoid this show, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who's looking for something super serious and dramatic. While there's a ton of great drama in this show, there's also a lot of goofy comedy which might put a few people off. I would also guide anime purists away from the dub because of how much flack it's gotten, however, I would still suggest checking out the subtitled version. Now, one thing I should mention before I end this video is that Orphen actually has a second season, and many of you might be wondering, well, is this an anime worth watching? No, absolutely not. This is a piece of crap series, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, even if you're fans of the original. Actually, if you're a fan of the original, it'll probably be worse for you because of how disappointing it is and the drop in quality from the first season. So yeah, watch the first season, stay away from the second season. If you'd like to watch this show, it's licensed by Sentai Filmworks in the US and Madman Entertainment in Australia and New Zealand. Anyway, thank you very much to everybody who watched this video. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave a comment, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, feel free to subscribe as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.